Jaron Lanier, thanks for joining me on UpFront. The New York Times just published a bombshell report revealing that Facebook knew about Russian meddling in the US elections, failed to penalize then presidential candidate Donald Trump for posting racist content, compromised its users' data privacy, and tried to smear its critics as anti-Semites. To quote from the Times headline, Facebook's strategy was to delay, deny, and deflect. You know Facebook. I'm sure you've probably interacted with Mark Zuckerberg. Does any of that surprise you? What's your reaction to this report?
I'm not entirely surprised by the report, although some of the details are surprising and shocking. I think from the Facebook point of view, or from Zuckerberg's point of view, he is always in what he perceives as a life or death struggle. Either Facebook controls the world or it dies. He doesn't perceive any kind of in-between outcome. And so therefore, there's a kind of an ethic of anything at all is allowed because it's either survival, total domination, or total death. And so if you perceive this all-or-nothing world, which I think is a false perception, then you lose all sense of proportion, obviously.
And given the crises plaguing Facebook, which go back to the 2016 US election and beyond, are Mark Zuckerberg, the chair and CEO, and Sheryl Sandberg, the COO, are they still the right people to be running Facebook right now, or is it time for them to step aside?
Well, one of the peculiarities of Facebook is that it's the only public corporation that's large and is effectively controlled by one person. And it's, in a sense, that's an oxymoron. A public corporation should have a powerful board. It should have powerful shareholders. And the fact that there isn't governance is the first issue. That it's a one-man shop is really, really not okay. It's not okay for the world. It's not even in the spirit of capitalism. I think it's really anti-market. It's anti-democratic.
So he should step aside and make it more democratic and capitalist.
I think it would be good for the world if he stepped aside, but the point is that there's no mechanism for him to do so. Yeah.
Last year, Mark Zuckerberg said Facebook's mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Given these recent revelations, given your own research in this field, do you buy that?
Well, you know, from my perspective, having participated in the creation of the Internet in the first place, it's the Internet that brought people together. And yet, whenever Facebook shows up somewhere, it seems to incite intercommunal bloodshed. Yeah. Because the very way it functions is by grabbing people's emotions, and the easiest ones to grab are the negative ones, the fight or flight emotions. And so it tends to raise passions and then put those raised passions into this cycle until they become ever worse. And then you start to have the Rohingya crisis, yes, crises in South India, crises in rural Africa. So we see bizarre, thuggish powers coming into play that are displacing democracy in countries as different as Sweden and Brazil. What else do they have in common other than Facebook? That's, you know, that's all they have in common.
WhatsApp, of course, in Brazil, which is owned by Facebook. It's interesting you raised the issue of the Rohingya and the ethnic cleansing. The New York Times did draw attention to that in their piece and say Facebook ignored people who warned them about ethnic cleansing and their role in it. The 2016 election, of course, has really brought this argument to the fore about Facebook's role in politics, as it were. There's been a lot of debate and controversy over it. Facebook say these allegations are untrue, they're inaccurate about their role in the elections and whether they knew about Russian meddling, etc. Do you believe there is evidence to suggest that Facebook had a measurable impact on the outcome of the US presidential election, on the outcome of the Brexit referendum? Did it actually change votes?
I would say there's enough strong evidence and enough consensus of enough people with enough different, well-intentioned and well-informed perspectives that we should finally just say what the American intelligence establishment has said and what many others have said is that yes, Facebook did change the outcome of the American election. And Facebook's property, WhatsApp, did change the outcome of the Brazilian election. Probably played a role in Brexit, probably played a role in many other events in the world in recent years.
Wow. And it's interesting, you say that the problem is much broader than Facebook. It's social media itself. You say that there are 10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now. That's the title of your book. So we don't have time to get into all 10. What are your top 2 arguments for why people watching this interview should get off of social media?
Well, I would say, first of all, there could be some good form of social media. The problem with social media right now is that it's designed to manipulate you. And so if you enjoy free will, if you enjoy being an honest person in the world, you should not be using present-day social media. The business model of Facebook and other companies like Twitter is anytime you connect with another person, that's financed by some third party you don't know about who's trying to manipulate you in some sneaky way. So it's this giant manipulation machine by design. Every penny they earn was earned because somebody thought they could manipulate somebody else. Another one is the 10th argument, which is the spiritual one, which is there's effectively a new religion that's being promoted by Facebook and some of the other tech companies, which is that people are just information machines. We're modules, and we're all being connected together into a giant computer through these companies, and this giant computer will be this super intelligent AI that'll be better than humanity and will inherit the world. And so it's essentially a new kind of religion. And if you practice an existing religion, or if you're an atheist, whatever you are, you're gradually being sucked into this other tech religion, and it's a crappy religion. I mean, it's a silly religion, and you might not be aware of it because it happens gradually. And so I'd ask you to examine very carefully whether you're buying into this this bizarre new way of thinking. And if you want to learn more about that, you can find it in the book.
And just to check, Jaron, do you practice what you preach? Do you participate in any social media yourself?
Oh, God, no. I would never have an account on one of those things. I do fine without any account on Facebook or Twitter or any of the rest of them. You actually don't disappear if you delete your accounts.
Some people might say that if everybody in the Arab world, for example, had listened to your advice in 2010, 2011 and deleted their social media accounts, we wouldn't have had some of the revolutions in the Middle East. We may not have had the Arab Spring because in many ways those revolutions in Egypt, in Tunisia, they've been dubbed the Facebook revolution, the Twitter revolution. That's what they've been called.
Yeah, so here's what happens. Every time somebody uses platforms like Facebook and Twitter to affect positive social change, where they're saying, well, we can make our country better, we can achieve this or that, the algorithms in the background take whatever those people have done and they broadcast whatever information those people have given, the text, the images, everything, and they're looking for engagement from the broad population. And what they do is they discover where the most engagement is, and the most engagement is inevitably with those people who are inflamed by it, and then those people who are angry and irritated, scared, whatever, they'll zoom in on them, and then they'll incite it, introduce them to each other, and then the whole tool will refine itself for the most engagement, which inevitably is with the people who are the most angry, the most insecure, the most jealous, the most afraid, and then it becomes a tool for those people, and suddenly what you have is an ideal recruitment tool for ISIS. So you start with something that helps the Arab Spring, you end up with something that's optimized for ISIS.
You say that these are not just social media companies, they are behavior modification empires, and that we, the users, our behavior is turned into an empire for rent. A lot of people say you're questioning free will. You're saying that we're actually lost our ability to make free choices. We've been so duped. Is there actual evidence for that? Because a lot of people say, well, actually, no, it's fashionable to say we're addicted, but we're not really addicted to social media. Researchers at UNICEF, researchers at Oxford University have said, you know what, we're actually not addicted to social media in the way that you say we are in your book.
Well, the last person who can recognize an addiction is the addict, right? And so from a technical point of view, social media addiction is similar to gambling addiction. And if you've ever talked to somebody with a gambling addiction, you'll see the same things. Oh, I'm not addicted. I just know how to be lucky. I have a system. And it's a very similar process. Facebook's own published research that went through academic peer review shows that they can alter people's emotions without the people understanding and being able to be consciously aware that Facebook did it to them. There was a famous study in which they made masses of people sad without those people's consent, and nobody understood that it was happening to them. To say that you can be aware of that is a fool's game. You cannot be. We know that you cannot be.
And just to be clear, of the 5 big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, you say it's Google and Facebook that are doing the most damage to our behavior and our lifestyles, not Amazon, which has been in the news this week for lots of criticism over the way it's got money out of governments, Apple, Microsoft. You say it's Google and Facebook. Is that right?
Well, look, there are plenty of reasons to criticize Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook. And for full disclosure, I have a relationship with Microsoft now. And for even fuller disclosure, I've sold a company to Google. I actually really like big tech companies. I'm not sort of anti-corporate or anti-tech companies. However, what distinguishes Google and Facebook is that they rely almost solely on the manipulation machine for their money. They don't have any diversification. They're absolutely addicted to it, like petrostates are addicted to oil. And so it does, in my view, corrupt them. Now, the things I'm talking about, these manipulations, all the tech companies engage in them to some degree, but not totally. So there might be additional reasons to criticize the other tech companies. There probably are. But as far as this particular issue of running a mass mental manipulation machine for profit, that's really Google and Facebook. And then a few smaller companies like Twitter.
You make the argument very strongly in your book. You're making the argument very eloquently today. But do you worry that your connection to Microsoft, which you said, full disclosure, you've been a researcher at Microsoft, do you think that undermines your argument, that you're part of one of the quote-unquote rivals? You're part of one of the companies that you're saying isn't as bad as Google and Facebook. Does that undermine you in some way?
Well, I love Silicon Valley. I'm a creature of it. And I want us to be better. And I feel that being a loyal opposition, being able to say, what we're doing is wrong, we need to change, is my duty. And I used to be rather lonely doing this. There weren't too many others, but in recent years, it's actually become much more acceptable and common for people in the tech industry to criticize the tech industry, and I think it's enormously healthy. So I don't think we should rely on people like me who are within the tech industry to be the sole critics or the sole agents of change. That would be a problem. But I think it's crucial that there be people inside the industry willing to call the truth.
But as an industry
insider,
as someone who was there for the start of the internet, and you say you love Silicon Valley, you want to see it improve. On the one hand, some people will say, your supporters will say, see, even Jaron Lanier is saying this, and he was there from the beginning. He knows it inside out. Others might say, hold on, that makes Jaron Lanier a hypocrite because he made his name in this field, he made his money out of it, and now he's criticizing everyone else who's still in the business.
You know, I was one of the earlier people to criticize what we're doing. I started writing critical essays about this. I wrote an essay in '92 saying if we keep on going where we're doing, there might someday be these bots that would do battle with each other to influence people and could throw an election. So, I mean, I've been worried about this for a long time. Does it make me a hypocrite for sticking with it? Possibly. But you know what? If that's so, use what I'm saying to your benefit. Read the arguments. If they're helpful, if you find any power from them, use them. I really don't who cares if I'm a hypocrite? I'm just one person. I'm not running for office. I'm not asking you for anything. What I can give you is a perspective that you won't get from many other places of how an insider saw us make these terrible mistakes. And that's what I can offer you.
Jaron Lanier, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you so much for having me.